It's time for the Daily Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest have undertaken an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Planet podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly and I am your host, and I'm joined by my co-host and co-multicelled organism, Matt Freeman. Matt, how's it going?
Oh, doing great, Scott. My cells are all functioning nominally. and I think today what we feel like talking about is actually podcasts, to go a bit meta on you.
That is true. This is a podcast on podcasts. But the reason we're doing this, Matt, is because, well, I mean, it's technically our 53rd podcast, but we're going to say it's been a year. We're going to say we're celebrating the fact that we've been doing this for a year. It's going to be on our 53rd podcast, but you know what? Who cares? We do what we want. So this is the one we picked to celebrate. We'll probably celebrate our 100th podcast on episode 105 or something, just because we feel like it.
Right.
But we just wanted to take this podcast to look back over the year, what we've learned about podcasting, and then just to talk about some podcasts we like. But we've done that a little bit before, just in our what we've been watching / listening to / reading section at the end of the podcasts, but we've never really spent a whole episode doing that, so we're going to do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because out of all of the entertainment media that I consume, I think I probably spend the most time consuming podcasts because I generally listen to them on my commute, which is extremely long. So, you know, I don't know if I do this every day, but I wouldn't say it's atypical that I listen to over 2 hours of podcasts in a day. So yeah, that's me.
I know I do more than that because I listen to them on my commute and then while I'm sitting at my desk. If I'm not in a meeting or doing something that requires so much focused attention that I can't have stuff in the background, that's what I'm doing. And I know that it's more than 2 hours because I was at Fantastic Fest for a week and a half, and I am basically on the edge of a knife with my podcasts. I am perpetually trying to get caught up, and so if anything in my schedule changes even a little bit, I'll start getting behind, and then it'll just keep piling up on me. And that's the situation I'm in right now. But I've been focusing at work, which is, I'm sure my bosses will love to hear, but I'm clearing through my podcast, and I'm slowly catching up. But yeah, no, I spent a lot of time with it too. It's the talk radio of the 21st century, and not unsurprisingly, most of mine are film related. But I'd like to think I have a eclectic mix of them. I got some comedy shows on there. I have some book related stuff and some TV related stuff, and some history related stuff.
Cool.
But before we get into all that, Matt, I wanted to go over some news with you because it's been like a month since we talked about anything newsy, and there's some interesting things happening. The first thing I wanted to talk about was our favorite topic here at Daily Planet Films, the DC Universe. Because the Suicide Squad film is getting a extended cut that is going to come out in November, I think. So if you'll remember, that was a terrible movie that we all hated. And I know you haven't seen it, but trust me, you will hate it. But the director said that was his movie. The director's cut was the final cut. There was not going to be an extended cut. That was not going to happen. It is happening. So DC continues to not know what to do and is scrambling to find ways to make just a little bit more money from their movies that are basically considered failures, even though they make a lot of money.
Yep. I mean, it seems obvious that they did some calculation that showed that they would actually make more money by doing a director's cut. And so they did that, even though everyone thinks it's dumb. Which, I mean, I guess you can't really say that it's dumb if it's going to end up making them money on some level. Although I would argue, of course, that it undermines their brand credibility and what's the word? Just the quality of the brand in general.
Yeah, especially since DC was supposed to be the director's studio. Like when they were putting this whole thing together, they were very critical of Marvel and how Marvel was the studio machine, that directors did not get their vision, did not get their dream of the film. They were forced to comply with whatever Marvel wanted, but DC was the place where a director could come and make the film they wanted to make according to their vision, and they would honor that and make these films. And that's not what's happened, because we keep getting these extended quote unquote director's cuts that is everything that the director wanted in the film, but that the studio made them remove. So it's just all bullshit, and it's all gamesmanship and trying to get an extra buck.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if like Pixar put out a director's cut. You know, it's like self-evident that this is a ridiculous and cheap tactic.
Yeah, and I think there are cases where director's cuts are better. I think the most famous example to me is, oh wow, I'm blanking on the name of the film now. The Ridley Scott film with Legolas
Prometheus?
in it. No.
Oh no. Oh, Kingdom of Heaven.
Thank you, Kingdom of Heaven. Yeah, a movie that is terrible, but the director's cut is actually a good film. So there are moments where that will help, I think, improve the overall impression of the film. But yeah, I mean, it makes the studio look kind of stupid, doesn't it? Because like, if the extended cut was really the best cut, why is that not the one that you put in theaters?
Yep.
But anyway, so that's happening. Suicide Squad extended cut. I will not be buying it. But maybe since you haven't seen the movie, maybe when you see a version, it will be the extended cut. You can tell me what you think of it.
Honestly, that's probably what's going to happen.
Well, there you go. Next up, I wanted to talk about Star Wars Episode 7, because we haven't done that enough. The topic in question is Red Letter Media, the guys behind the Planket Reviews of the prequels, Episodes 1, 2, and 3, that both you and I absolutely love. This is kind of one of the things that really brought me into video film criticism. I mean, I think one of the founders really of using YouTube and video formats for critical film analysis. They released Episode 7, their review of Episode 7 under the same theme, and it is not without controversy. You watched this all the way through, I'm sure. It's a 2-hour video, but I think we both watched just about the second it dropped.
I think we've both been fans of this forever.
Yeah. And I've watched those 3 originals. You've probably watched it more than me, but I've watched those 3 probably at least 3 times all the way through, which is, what's it, 8 hours each or something. That's ridiculous amount of.
Yeah, I don't even know how many times I've watched those. I mean, because I think they're genuinely funny, especially the first one, the Episode 1 film review, where, I mean, I'll just explain this because I'm sure some people somehow are not familiar with the Planket Reviews, but basically it's this guy named Mike Stoklasa basically playing a character named Harry Planket, and the Harry Planket character is like 100-year-old serial killer, and so it's the Harry Planket character who's doing the film review. So he's doing actually a very usually very intelligent film review while sort of interleaving his analysis with like really off-color jokes and violent imagery. And it's just, if you have the right kind of sense of humor, it's the best thing ever. But as you said, Scott, the new one is, I don't know, I'd say it's being pretty poorly received overall. It's like first of all, it's like 2 hours long. I think that makes it longer than the others. I may be mistaken on that. And it doesn't, it's not really a review of Episode 7 until almost like an hour and 10 minutes into it. It's mostly sort of responding to a lot of the current milieu and discussion of the prequels, you know, years after the first reviews were released. And then when it finally gets to Episode 7, it's very kind of bordering between not very interesting analysis because those guys actually like the movie, and then the analysis that it does make is very questionable.
That's a good way of putting it.
So yeah, it's basically, I don't know, the one area where people are really up in arms is that they, well, so this is the thing. This is my thing about it, is I think there is some misinterpretation of their point, but I think that's because their point was not made very clearly. I think what they were saying is that the Disney Corporation made a very calculated move by making this episode 7 very diverse in its cast by having a female lead and a black co-lead / whatever the word is for that, and basically just putting a lot of diversity across the board into the cast. They're being accused of saying that diversity doesn't matter, and they do come very close to saying that diversity doesn't matter in the review. Well, what do you think, Scott? Do you think
they say that kids don't care about diversity, which is, I mean, I think it's a fair statement. Kids don't care, but that doesn't make it not important. It's funny because the Planket Reviews in the past have used the phrase multiple times. You might not notice, but your brain does. And that is something with diversity in movies that happens, even on a subconscious level, that if you constantly, if the entertainment you consume is constantly narrowly focused to show one certain point of view, one type of people, the generic white male type of viewpoint, that's becomes programmed into you. So I get your point, and I think you're right that what they were trying to say is this is another example of how this movie was cold, corporate, calculated stuff. But when it comes to diversity, I don't think that's bad. I think like you have to, from a corporate perspective, make calculated decisions like that to say, yes, we are going to be the company and the corporation that says we are going to spend time and energy to make sure this film is diverse, because it won't happen on its own. It's not, it won't, you don't just go out and cast people without making a conscious decision like that and end up with a diverse cast. That's still not the way Hollywood works, unfortunately. So it is up to corporations to make that decision and make that distinction and to go with it. So framing that argument as if it was a bad thing is what I think people are most upset about.
Yeah, I think so. Also, I think, again, the review was probably overlong, not as funny as the previous ones, and just in general, not up to what people view as their standard. I didn't hate it as much as a lot of people did, but I don't think I'm going to go rewatch it 100 times like I did with the first one.
No, so. and there's two issues to me. I mean, I think the takedown of the modern revisiting of the prequels thing that's been going on is valid, because that is happening. That there are these, I keep seeing essays and articles saying that prequels aren't that bad, and look at this complicated ring theory bullshit that isn't true. So I understand they're lashing out to that because they are kind of the origin source of serious, detailed criticism of why the prequels didn't work. So when they read all this stuff after they spent hours talking about this to say, well, no, it's actually not that bad, I can see they get frustrated. So I understand why they spent time on that. Maybe that should have gone in its own video. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the thing that people went to them for originally with these Planket reviews was really in-depth, detailed story analysis. And they just really don't do that on this movie. And maybe you're right, maybe it's because they just liked the movie and they didn't have much to say about it. But if that's the case, they probably shouldn't have waited almost a full year until after the film came out to release this, because I feel like the story things that they did talk about has been discussed ad nauseum by every other hot take and essay and video essay that's been made since this film came out. The landscape in the world of online video criticism has completely changed since they started. And they need to be quicker if they're going to make a dent in it like they did before.
That is kind of amazing that when they came out with the Phantom Menace review, it was like earth shattering to so many people, including me. And what they weren't saying anything that wasn't fairly basic story analysis type ideas. It was just that these it was not a thing yet to discuss these things, and especially not in a lengthy YouTube video format.
Right.
So
well, I think this was 2009 or 2008. So this is YouTube still had like the 10-minute requirement on it.
Mm-hmm.
So like they had to post these things and like, well, I think they originally didn't even, the first reviews weren't even on YouTube. It wasn't even a YouTube format. It was some other online video player. And then they eventually ported to YouTube, but it was in like 8 different episodes.
Yeah.
Because,
right.
So yeah, I mean, the landscape has entirely changed. So yeah, I think it's just level expectations, and people were disappointed along with some bad points they made.
Yeah, and then one final comment is that I watched their other movie review show, the Half in the Bag. I've watched I think every episode of that actually, and they already make a lot of the same points on Half in the Bag that they make in this episode 7 review. They're constantly whining about like the fact that everyone's always just making sequels and cynically designing movies at the studio level, and it's like, okay, I at least have already heard all these things, so I was just kind of bored by that aspect of the review in particular.
Right. Maybe just don't talk about blockbuster film then. Like there's plenty of original non-sequel movies out there, but they're independent fare, lower budget, limited release type stuff. So yeah, I mean, that I think it's a disconnect between what brings them subscribers and Patreon supporters and what they actually want to do.
Right. Yeah, I think they just hate superhero movies, but they end up reviewing all of them.
Yeah, because that's what people click on.
Exactly.
I mean, even this, like, I haven't looked at the video recently. But when I looked at it yesterday, it already had over 1 million views. So this is obviously something that gets them the money they need to stay operating. But I don't think this video felt like they didn't really want to do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I wonder if they'll do the same thing for the Rogue One movie that's coming out this year. I don't know. I am listening to less and less of their stuff these days.
Yeah, I think they just they care about it less than they used to. I think, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's interesting because there's an argument to that we, for an example, do this for fun. We do it because we really like it, so we care about it. Somewhere along the line, if you're as successful as these guys have been, which they are, their Patreon is generating thousands of dollars a month for them, enough for I think all 3 or 4 of them to live just off of doing that. And it becomes a job, and at the point it becomes a job, maybe your passion for it just wanes a little bit, and it feels like work and not a thing you're doing on the side for fun. So to give them credit, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So that's all I had for news. I really just wanted an excuse to talk about that Red Letter Media review, and I thought I'd drop something else in there. But let's move on to talking about podcasts. So, when you and I started this thing, I think we had a vague idea of what we wanted it to be, but we also had no knowledge of how to record a podcast, how to edit a podcast, how to upload a podcast. How do we get it on SoundCloud? How do we get it on iTunes, on Android? How do we do all this stuff? And really, it's been kind of like a trial by fire for us. But I do think, and I don't want to make this whole segment just us bragging, but I think we've really gotten into a rhythm with this, and I think it is going very well. I think our content quality has improved. If you go back and look at that first episode, we're definitely more comfortable in front of the microphones. But I also think our sound quality has improved as I've learned how to set compressors and equalizers and gates within the editing software I use. So what's your overall opinion on the growth of this podcast?
I think the most positive thing in my mind is that we now have these like show format things like the Kryptonian Collection and the Phantom Zone, and I also really enjoy our Deconstructing Directors series. So we kind of have like a sub series within the greater the greater podcast and allows us to really focus down on some particular idea. Whereas when we started, we didn't have any of those notions at all. We were just like, okay, some random new idea about movies that we want to talk about, and that was fine because, you know, especially toward the beginning, it's kind of there's a lot of low hanging fruit when it comes to fun, you know, things that sound fun to talk about, and it's practically anything is fun to talk about, really. But yeah, I really like the formatted shows and you know the ones that have sort of a contest format. Those are fun. I've also really enjoyed the book club. I know we haven't done that in a while, but like that really is very enjoyable to me. And I hope we get back to that again. I know there are definitely some segment of our audience really appreciates that content. So
yeah, and that's you know, I think one of the things we've struggled with, might not be the right word, but is feeling out different show types. You know, like we started Kryptonian Collection. We're on episode 6, I think, is coming up of that. So we just do one of those per month. I think those are relatively popular. But yeah, stuff like the book club, which I agree with you. I think that's so much fun, and I enjoy having like a structured format that it forces me to sit down and read a book by a certain date and then talk about it by another certain date. I really enjoy that. That is, I want to bring that back too. I just want like with that, I really, really want the audience interaction. Like, you know, we've asked for audience interaction, and we have plenty of listeners, and I appreciate all our listeners. And I know like some people just don't like asking questions or interacting or commenting, and that's fine. But with the book club, I want it to be a thing where the people listening all along read the book with us and then bring us different ideas that we don't see that we can then talk about. I'd love to set up like a lot of podcasts have like a voicemail that you can dial into and they leave messages and we can just play the messages back on the podcast. These are all things I'd love to do, but we need the viewers or listeners out there to participate. So
yeah, and that may be you know, on us to some degree. It may be that we're not supplying a clear communication in terms of how to contact us, and
absolutely, yeah,
and it because, you know, we do end with saying like, yeah, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, etc. But maybe we just need to be clearer and say, contact us via this channel, via Twitter or via email. I mean, we check all of those, but maybe it would help the audience to have confidence that they're going to be heard if we were clear on that front. So
well, and another thing that I thought of not long ago is, you know, when I'm listening to podcasts and I get to that end part where the host is just telling me where you can find them on the internet, that's usually when I stop the podcast and move on to the next one. Right. So there is also a good chance that those things are being communicated but not being listened to, because that's just human behavior and what people do. Just like I fast forward over all the advertisements on all the podcasts I listen to. So I think if you're listening out there and you feel like you've wanted to reach out to us and join in on some of these discussions, let us know if you think there's a better way, a better format for doing that. I mean, we have both of our Twitter accounts. We have email, Daily Planet Films @gmail. We have our Daily Planet Films Twitter account. I think Adrian set up a Phantom Zone Twitter account, so we have one specific for that show, and we can keep doing that for all our other shows. But people reach out, and if there's enough interest to do those book clubs again, I would absolutely love to do it, because I agree those are so much fun.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, just to follow up on your comments about kind of the technical side of things, I think if you had told me a year ago how solid we would be on the technical side, I would be surprised. You know, we're on every platform that podcasts exist on almost, and we have everything, you know, nicely integrated and streamlined and interconnected, and a Patreon and everything. So it's and it was all done kind of by the seat of the pants, just kind of learning as we go.
Right.
And I'm pretty impressed with how far we've come, just, you know, one thing at a time, week after week.
Yeah, I am too. And I think we're experimenting, right? So I think that's some of the most fun is some of the Kryptonian Collection episodes we've thrown in clips from the films. That's still something I need to work on because I can't figure out how to make the clips louder. I crank the volume on the clip as loud as it goes, and it's still comparative to our audio is way too quiet. But we're learning. But yeah, it is really cool. Like I know how to edit audio now, and when I first started doing this, I would have to like mute out like the spaces in between when each person was talking manually. Before I figured out you could just do a noise gate, and when I stop talking, the audio thing just blanks out what's coming from my mic. Didn't know that existed. Figured it out, and then started doing it. And it has been a lot of fun. And if there's anyone out there listening that wants to start their own podcast, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of getting comfortable just sitting in front of a microphone and talking for an hour and a half. But it's fun, and it's not impossible to do. It's not hard. It's just time consuming and requires dedication.
Yeah, and then before you know it, you've got a whole backlog of them.
Oh yeah, God, 53 episodes, man! I can't believe it. Yeah. So let's move on to talk about after you're finished listening to our podcast, what podcasts we think you should be listening to. Like I said, we work in this a lot, but we also play in this area a lot. So we know plenty of different. A lot of these are podcasts I've taken inspiration from. I did not do any idea stealing, but just like structure and format and transition and just listening to people have conversations, you kind of pick up on how you handle certain topics and how you handle making sure each person's getting enough time to talk, etc. So Matt, why don't you start us off with what your top podcasts are and most inspiring, I guess.
Yeah, so I'll probably start with the top one, and I'll comment first that it was hard for me to rank like my favorite one because it really depends on the mood you're in, or the mood I'm in, I should say. I really do I'm just like absolutely not in the mood for certain ones sometimes, and then other times I would say that one is my favorite. Mm-hmm. But the one I've listened to the longest by far would be the Tim Ferriss Show. The Tim Ferriss Show is a podcast where author Tim Ferriss interviews. I'm just going to copy his spiel. Actually, he interviews top performers in all kinds of different fields and tries to extract the habits, routines, and tools that allow those people to be top performers. And he's got about 180, so maybe 175 podcast episodes under his belts, and almost all of those are interviews, usually like 2-hour, very long, very in-depth interviews with people like. I'm just going to kind of pick some names here. I'm not going to go on too long, but the names that people might recognize: Ed Norton, Jamie Foxx, Rainn Wilson, Kevin Costner, Jocko Willink, who I'm going to talk about later, Scott Adams, who made Dilbert, Robert Rodriguez, General Stanley McChrystal, Amanda Palmer, the musician, Matt Mullenweg, who is basically the inventor and CEO of WordPress, Tony Robbins, Peter Thiel, Dan Carlin from Hardcore History, who we're also going to talk about today. So, and these are just names that I'm like, I'm confident people will recognize these. But a lot of these people, sometimes strangely, it's the ones who you've never heard of who you end up learning the most from. And it's really not an interview in the sense of like, where were you born? Where did you grow up? And it's very detail oriented on like, okay, you are a world-class gymnast. Let's talk about like strength and conditioning exercises for 25 minutes, and then move on to like what exact poses and the details of those poses, and like and then when he's talking to Ed Norton, he'll talk about completely different things, and it's very interesting, especially when you listen to 180 or whatever episodes of these, that you're even if you don't consciously think about it, you start picking up on a lot of commonalities just in like the attitudes of people who tend to be highly successful. Just as a as a morsel, if you're thinking about listening to this, like one thing that is really shocking to me is something in the range of 80% of these people have a meditation practice,
Huh.
Which you would never hear about otherwise. Like it's just that, Tim Ferriss has noticed this pattern, and he's like, and do you have any kind of morning ritual? Do you have any kind of meditative practice? And then usually they sort of like bashfully are like, yeah, I've been doing transcendental meditation for 15 years. And it's like, and it's like, wow, like so many of these really high level people. And, and it's actually gotten me started doing that off and on just because it's like, well, I have no excuse not to try this. If there's a lot of things like that. There's a lot of interesting diets that a lot of successful people happen to have in common. And so anyway, I think that's a very, very valuable show. Even if it's not like the most entertaining thing in the world sometimes because it goes into the weeds so much. But that's a very, very valuable show, even if you just pick through and listen to the episodes that are starring people who you care about. I think there'd be a lot of value there.
So if you had to pick like a handful of, if someone wanted to get into this, obviously didn't have time to listen to all 180, but wanted to get a good idea of what the podcast is, just a handful of critical episodes, I guess, what would they be?
Yeah, let me try to like scan over this. Like a lot of the ones that have a lot of value to me tend to be like fitness oriented, even though I'm not that like fitness oriented myself. It just is very interesting to learn things that I just never would have suspected. So there's this one episode 158. I didn't write down the name of the guy, but he's like an Olympic coach for gymnasts. And he says all kinds of things about like strength training and fitness that I just never, ever heard before. And I'm someone who sort of consumes a lot of fitness advice. So I thought that was very valuable. The Jamie Foxx interview, episode 124, is incredible because Jamie Foxx is quite a character. And that's really worth a listen. 107, episode 107, where he interviews Jocko Willink, is also really, really awesome. And let's see, I would say the one where he interviews Glenn Beck is very interesting just because like he manages to sort of show you a side of Glenn Beck that you probably haven't seen before. There's really, it depends on who you like. If he has Mike Shinoda of Linkin Park, if you like Linkin Park, I would listen to that. If not, then skip it. But it's the Arnold Schwarzenegger one is actually really great too. That's episode 60. That's all the top picks I'm going to give you now, because otherwise I just kind of keep going. But,
that's fair.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably my top pick. Do you want to bounce it back to you, and we can just kind of go back and forth with our podcast picks?
So there's a husband and wife team that does, God, they must do 5 or 6 podcasts a week now. That I've been listening to for a year and a half, I think. The name of the website is Storywonk, and they have a bunch of different podcasts, but it's Alistair Stevens and Lonnie Diane Rich, and we'll put the links to all their stuff. But I originally came to them because they had started a episode by episode critical analysis and walkthrough of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which, as anyone that listens to the show knows, is my favorite show of all time because I bring it up every episode. But I started listening to these guys and was immediately taken aback by how well they understand story and structure, and not just understand it, but how well they can communicate that understanding and teach you something about what the show was trying to do and where it didn't succeed. They're very critical of the show, and they love it too, but they're very critical of it in showing, hey, this is where this episode was really bad. Here's what they didn't do well. That was my entrance point into them, and then I was greeted this world of podcasts. They've been doing it for a long time, but they have a show where they're doing the same thing for Veronica Mars. They did detailed 2-hour-long podcasts about each of the Star Wars episodes that were brilliant. They do book seminars where it's kind of like our book club thing, where Alistair will go through a book like 3 chapters at a time, and then have like a live seminar on YouTube where he analyzes the chapters and does readings and talks about specific things with them. They're doing the second Harry Potter book on that right now, and it's fascinating. And they're also doing going through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, literally every single thing within it. So every single movie, every single episode of every single television show. So they do these grand, long, extending projects, but they're so good. They're so good, and they're so like not just well produced, but just fascinating to listen to. And these two people, they play off each other really well because obviously they're husband and wife. It's just really fascinating, and I've taken a lot of my goals on when I'm explaining something story wise or critiquing a film. A lot of what I want to do in podcasting is because of what I've listened to these guys do, and they're far better at it than I am. They probably might always be, but that's what I shoot for. So I'm trying to think of, because like Storywonk is the website, but each of their podcasts is its own show with their own name. Dusted is the name of the Buffy one. We Can Do This All Day is the name of the Marvel Cinematic Universe one. Trying to think of what else. Looking through my podcasts, but yeah, I mean, I think storywonk.com is their website, and they have all the information there. Like the type of thing is like, if you haven't seen Buffy, listening to these podcasts doesn't do anything for you. But there are a lot of people that watch and listen. Like, so if they're watching for the first time, they'll watch the episode and then listen to the podcast right after. And I think that's a great way of doing it.
Cool. So where would you recommend that I start, since you know me fairly well, at least?
I would start for you on their Star Wars podcast,
okay,
which is called Story in Star Wars, and it really dives deep into the story of the Star Wars universe and goes through each movie very detailed. And then I'd probably move on to their Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. Okay.
Yeah, the Star Wars stuff sounds right up my alley, obviously. So I'm excited about that. I didn't realize they had that. I know you mentioned it. You've mentioned this podcast to me before, but I didn't know they had that specific feature.
Yeah, and their story summary, like, so they do that seminar for Harry Potter, and they also release those as podcast episodes as well. It's called Dear Mr. Potter, and his goal is to eventually work through every single book. He does one a year, because I think they do one book at a time in their seminar series, but they move on to different kind of books. They've done, I think, the Outlander books, because they have an Outlander podcast as well. I've never really listened to that one because I never got into that show, but they do so much, and it's all really, really good.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm actually, you've convinced me. I'm definitely gonna cue this one up.
I really think you will enjoy it. So I will punt it back to you after that.
Okay. I guess I'm not sure if this is my second favorite or whatever, but I've really gotten a lot of value out of the Jocko podcast, which is called Jocko Podcast.
And you've mentioned this one before, right? I think.
Yeah. And so I won't belabor it much more. I might go into more detail on which episodes maybe to start with, but it's Jocko Willink was a Navy SEAL commander, I guess, during the Iraq War, and saw a lot of actual combat, commanded during a lot of actual combat, and just had a kind of a huge amount of a certain type of life experience that is very, very rare, and he's a very rare kind of person. He's kind of a superhero in terms of like physical capability and mental toughness, and it's just really interesting because normal people like that don't choose to have a public life. Military guys specifically, there's almost like been a code of silence around being a special forces guy, but he specifically became like a business management consultant when he retired. So he tries to extract a lot of like leadership lessons from things. So the podcasts that he does, like the ones that I like the most that I listed here, would be like episode 6. He talks about Napoleon. And it's in a way where, like, you can read about Napoleon, but for some reason it's just very different hearing a guy who has commanded men in combat and been shot at and shot people and so forth, talking about Napoleon, because you just know that there's some level of credibility that he's bringing to the discussion that you're not necessarily getting in a history book.
Yeah.
I also liked his discussion of the U.S. Marine Corps manual in episode 8, which sounds very dry, but like there's a lot of stuff in the manual, in the USMC manual, that I would never have guessed is in there. Like it makes the Marines seem a lot more tactical than like pop culture portrays them as being. Like a lot more thoughtful, I should say. Let's see. There's episode 29 where he discusses the book Platoon Leader: A Memoir of Command and Combat by James R. McDonough. And I'll just lump that in with episode 30, 4 Hours in Mylay by Michael Bilton. And both of those, I lumped them together because they're just like utterly harrowing, not at all pleasant, gut-wrenching books. One of them is about the first one is about a guy who was a platoon leader in Vietnam, and the second one is a guy who, well, actually it's just the story basically of this horrible massacre committed by American soldiers on Vietnamese civilians. And, you know, first of all, it's information that I'd never heard, but secondly, it's so kind of special having someone like Jocko delivering this information, and his attitude toward it. I find I basically just on the spot kind of adopted his attitude, because he's a U.S. soldier. He's very patriotic, and he makes absolutely no excuses when it comes to like something like this horrible massacre. He's all about like ownership and fixing mistakes. And you would think that somebody like him would just never want to even acknowledge that that America committed this massacre, but he's like, no, we definitely need to acknowledge this. We need to make sure this never happens again. We have actually put a lot of systems in place to make sure this never happens again, and that it never ends. So anyway, it's very interesting character, and I've gotten a lot of value out of it. This is the one where, though, sometimes I'm just like, I just can't handle that level of intensity right now. I'm going to listen to something else.
Yeah. It's 8 a.m. drive or a train ride to work might be a little too early for that. Yeah.
So yeah, that's Jocko, and I really, really recommend that, especially kind of the ones that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I was super into that one when you talked about it last time, and I still very much am in, and I just haven't had time to actually add that to my queue and get started on it. But I think I will as soon as I get through my backlog of podcasts. But
cool.
That sounds like something that would be right up my alley.
Awesome. So how about you? What's your next pick?
So, and I tried to pick things that were different areas of the spectrum as far as what podcasts can offer. So my next one is a political podcast called Keeping It 1600. This is a podcast hosted by Obama's former director of communication and former head speechwriter. So these are two people that are very intimately involved in politics and campaigns, and I think they have 2 a week right now because we're ramping up to the election. This is one that we're like, most of these I would still recommend people go back and listen to old episodes because this is news. I don't think there's any value to that. So if you're gonna listen to this one, I would just jump in with the latest episode. It's really fascinating because of how crazy this election is right now. Obviously, they have a very Democratic lean to them because they're two clear Democrats that have worked for the current president. But they talk about polling, they talk about campaign, they talk about how the Democrats are nervous, but what the path to victory for both the candidates is electoral wise. They obviously talk about Donald Trump's gaffes, of which there are plenty. And it's just very interesting kind of getting an insider source into what goes on in politics, and they talk about the optics of situations a lot, which is a term I've quickly grown to hate, but it's very important in politics. But it's very interesting, especially it's kind of been the thing that I can always go to get some sharp opinions on what is happening with this election. I don't know what's going to happen to this podcast once the election is over. I think that largely depends on what the result of the election is. But For now, with a little over a month to go before the election, I think it's worth listening to.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really cool to have that insider perspective. It's very different from just like a bunch of random people, shooting their mouths off on the internet.
Yeah, and you mean like us?
Yeah, right.
Because they are insiders, they have a lot of media connections. So they have a lot of guests on the podcast that are former or current members of CNN, MSNBC, journalists, political. I think the guy who was Hillary's second choice for VP, I can't remember his name. They had him on the podcast, so they have a lot of very interesting guests that give their unique opinions as well. So
awesome.
Back to you, Matt.
All right. My next one is almost like a guilty pleasure podcast. It's the Joe Rogan Experience, and it's like popcorn compared to the other ones, kind of, because basically Joe Rogan he's a comedian. He's actually a pretty funny comedian, actually. And he did Fear Factor. He was the host of Fear Factor, which I never actually watched, but now I know this information because I listened to his podcast. And he just has this really great interviewing personality that is just very like charming. And even though he's kind of an ass sometimes, he's an ass in a very endearing way, and you just kind of love him, like, no matter what, or at least I do. Like he manages to disarm guests and get them to open up. Part of that is that his interviews are always like almost 3 hours in many cases.
Oh wow!
And so he sort of wears them down with just being like charming and funny and personable. Like, my favorite interview, I think, was his interview with Maynard James Keenan, the lead singer of Tool. And Maynard is like notoriously impossible to interview because he's such a like sardonic, passive aggressive guy, and he hates to be interviewed, but he'll do it because I guess his band members are like, look, we need publicity.
Yeah.
But Joe Rogan just sort of like what's the word? Unfailingly is just like himself, and Maynard starts out being like cold and taciturn, and by the end of the second hour he's just like opened up, and it's like they're just having this like one-on-one heart-to-heart conversation, and you're just listening in, which is very valuable for a voyeur like me who wants to know everything about Maynard because he's my favorite musician. And I named my son after him. But and he's also a good interview because he'll challenge people on their BS, but in like a playful way. So it very rarely feels like an antagonistic interview, even though, like, my favorite one is where this guy is like an Aikido practitioner, and Joe Rogan is a jiu-jitsu black belt, and Joe Rogan is just like kind of ripping into him about Aikido being silly, and but I don't know, it's fun, it's funny to me. And he has a lot of interesting interests that he manages to bring up with his guests and get really like kind of lively and original conversations going, like about like ancient civilizations and like how paleo life used to be, and how our lifestyle is falling short. And he's really obsessed with altered states of consciousness. He has a sensory deprivation tank in his basement. He's just really like kind of cool. It's like I said, it's kind of popcorn. There's not a lot of like actual honest to goodness value, but it's fun, and he has some really good guests. Like let me just grab a couple of them that not to go into it too much, but he has Lance Armstrong, Russell Brand. He had Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I'd
be interested in hearing that one.
Yeah, and obviously Maynard. So yeah, that's Joe Rogan.
That sounds cool. I'm always into another interview podcast. I have one I listen to that's really just focused on actors, but that sounds like something that I would like to listen to. Yeah,
the vast majority of his interviews are actually comedians. He's done like, I mean, it's literally like 900 interviews. I'm not making that up. He's been doing this for years and years. He's been doing this since before I even like knew what a podcast was. So he has like 900 of these 3-hour interviews, and the vast majority of them are comedians. So if you are going to check it out, I would skim through and look for people who you actually want to, hear about.
Okay.
So
I hope everyone out there checks that out. I will. I've seen that podcast. Like, it's near the top of charts, so I see it all the time when I'm perusing the podcast charts. So I will check it out.
Cool. All right. What's your next pick, Scott?
My next pick is kind of my guilty pleasure, although saying that makes it seem like it's not a good podcast, which it very much is. It's called My Brother, and Me. Have you heard of Monster Factory, Matt?
No, I don't think I have.
So Monster Factory it's by the same guys that do this podcast. It is a YouTube video series in which I think 2 of the 3 brothers play video games that have robust character creation screens, and they basically, their goal is to make the ugliest looking character ever, and then they play the game with them. And that sounds really stupid, but I promise you it is hilarious, and it's just because these 2 guys are just brilliantly skilled comedians. They are so funny. I will send you, Matt, after we're done, a link to one of them, and you'll be watching for about 5 minutes, and then you'll be like, "What is this?" And then you'll be dying laughing after that. Film Crit Hulk wrote a big long piece about how funny they are. So I'm not the only one thinking this. But anyway, they have a podcast called My Brother, and Me, which is the 3 of them. It's a comedy podcast. It's billed as kind of like an advice column type podcast. People send in questions and they answer the questions in obviously ridiculous and funny ways. They also will go to Yahoo Answers and pick out ridiculous questions that people ask on Yahoo Answers, because the thing that people use Yahoo Answers for is fascinating. But it's really funny. The 3 of them, they talk quick, and they just pass it back and forth, or around, I guess, the triangle with the 3 of them. They play off each other really well. I frequently catch myself laughing out loud. It's a very fun podcast. That's my morning drive one, because it's a great thing to listen to. Kind of perk you up in the morning.
That's great. That sounds good. Yeah, I think I need to add that into my mix, because Joe Rogan makes me laugh sometimes, but that's not really the goal. But this sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I will send you Monster Factory, and I promise you, I know exactly the episode I'm going to send you, and I promise you'll love it.
Okay, great.
Do you have another one you want to talk about?
Yeah, I thought I would just maybe mention the Sam Harris podcast, which is one that I always look forward to it. He doesn't update it as often as the other guys do. It's kind of less of a central project for him, but there are some really good ones. He interviews so Sam Harris is an author, and these days everyone refers to him as a public intellectual, which is a dubious title to have. And he ends up getting in all kinds of firefights with various political people on the internet and on Twitter and stuff. But he interviewed. There's a really good interview with him and Dan Carlin. There's a really good interview with him and Joshua Oppenheimer, who is the director of The Act of Killing.
Oh, isn't that Oppenheimer?
Yeah, isn't that Joshua Oppenheimer?
Yeah. So
yeah, and man, I'm blanking on movie titles right now, but it's a great. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's great because Joshua Oppenheimer speaks very eloquently and clearly on what he was trying to accomplish with that movie, and for our listeners, that's what me and Scott consider to be a very important documentary about this genocide that happened in Indonesia. And so it's a great conversation because it gives you a ton of insight onto this movie that I already thought was really important. Let's see. He also has an interview with Jocko Willink, like everyone else. every single one of the podcasts that I have mentioned today had Jocko Willink on as a guest, by the way.
So I guess we got to book him then. Call our publicist.
Right, yeah. Jocko over here. There's also a really good one with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And then he does a lot of one-offs that are not actually interviews. That are just kind of him talking. The thing about Sam Harris is that that I just said, Sam Harris would never say that. Sam Harris speaks like a robot, but not in an off-putting way. Like he's able to make he's able to speak in a way where you can just like see his IQ, because he just has like perfect speech patterns with like nested clauses, and he's able to do this even in an interview where it's obviously, impromptu, and it just kind of impresses you with the power of the clarity of his thinking. And it's nice. Like I like to have him in my repertoire of things I listen to, because I feel like just listening to the way he talks and thinks kind of is improving my thinking passively. I like
awesome
to think that. I don't know if it's true. So yeah, that's he's kind of last on my list just because he updates so infrequently that you can't really be that into it. But I do enjoy it when he puts one out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Back to you.
So I have one. I mean, I could go on. I think I just counted, and I think I'm subscribed to 32 podcasts. So I could literally go. We could go back and forth, I think, all night if we wanted to. But I have one I just started listening to. So I didn't want to like include it in my main 3 because I haven't listened to enough of it to come to a conclusion on it. But it's called Last Podcast on the Left. It is a serial killer podcast that's been going on for quite a long time. They're on episode 241, and they go through. It's kind of a crime podcast where they go through the details of different serial killers and talk about their past and the killings and what happened. And it's super detailed, super interesting. Really, really great podcast. I've listened to about 2 episodes, so it's a beginning episode, so I don't know how much has changed since started it, but it's really interesting. If you're all interested in the true crime serial killer type thing, this is one of the best.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those ones where I might be in the mood sometimes, but might be too intense other times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
Awesome.
All right. And I could name drop all day long, but
yeah, I mean, I think we also have talked about a lot of like we spent a long time talking about hardcore history in the past, and
yeah.
That's almost not even in the same class as all these because it updates so infrequently. It's more like
it's like a quarterly
giant load of audio that you get every once in a while.
Yep. I guess the only one I wanted to bring up, just so I could say I had one film related podcast. The Storywonk stuff is mostly television, but there's one called The Next Picture Show that's put on by the guys that used to work at the Dissolve, which was a film website that dissolved last year. And they basically, their whole approach is to take a new release and they compare it to an older movie that is similar in some facets and different in others, which is a really unique way of doing film criticism and analysis. So I appreciate that they do that. I think this week they compared the new film Don't Breathe, the horror film, with the Audrey Hepburn movie that I'm blanking on now. I have to look it up. Wait Until Dark, the Audrey Hepburn movie where she plays a blind woman and people are invading her house. So I will say that you can tell when they have written stuff down and they're just reciting what they've written down versus when they're just talking off the cuff. It's very kind of a jarring transition when they move from here's our pre-written summary of something to let's talk about this now. But other than that, they have really interesting points of view and it's a good podcast. So that's cool. The Next Picture Show.
Yeah. And I'm obligated to mention that the fans of the web serial Worm have created a podcast which is just them taking turns reading the chapters of Worm.
Oh, wow.
Because I have to mention Worm at every podcast.
That is true. It's your obligation. Worm and Tool, you got them both in this podcast. Yeah.
This is a good day.
All right, so before we move on to our closing stuff, Matt, so we're episode 53. Where do you want 100 episode 100? So a year from now, give or take a few weeks. Where would you want the podcast to be? Where do you see it growing to?
Yeah, so this isn't something that I've discussed on air, but I would love to actually have guests. Authors or creators of various kinds that I'm a fan of, or that that others of us are fans of, and try try our hands at interviewing, and mainly because I think that would be really, really fun to do. That's kind of the main thing that I think about, actually. There's all kinds of other directions, obviously, that we're going to grow in, and but that would be like, if I had to say like what I really would love to do in the next year, then that would be it.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
How about you?
I agree with you. I would love to get guests on. I think we've been doing a relatively good job of expanding our list of recurring guests that come back. There's people that I've met through my film communities that we've started to have on regular. Adrian's a good example of one. I talked to a bunch of people at Fantastic Fest this past week, and drunkenly invited them all to come on the podcast. So
awesome.
We're going to be doing that. But yeah, I think having people that are in the field of art and creation of a lot of things we talk about, having them on and getting to interview them and listen, getting some insights into what goes into their work would be really great. I would like to do, so I think I would really like the book club to be a thing. Like this time next year, I would like that to be like a monthly thing that we've added. Because right now we have our monthly. I would like to have a monthly thing, so a different thing every week that we do on a monthly basis. I think would be my ideal. So we've already got 2. We've got some of our one-off episodes, like the deconstructing series, which I absolutely love. But I would like to add a couple things to that, and I think the book club is a great way to do it. I'd like to talk about TV a little more, because I watch a lot of TV, and I think having some of those TV conversations. I really liked our podcasts on Game of Thrones, so doing something like that for other shows would be good. Except there are like 7,000 recap shows for every single television show that comes out, so I don't want to just copy that formula. I think that's boring, but doing something along those lines would be good. And I just want to grow it. I'd like more listeners. And in a perfect world, I'd like to get a studio, but that's not happening. So I will continue to just be in my guest bedroom. But
yeah, I think having more listeners is a reasonable goal, and a good one.
Yeah, and I think we've been doing a pretty good job of expanding it to those other platforms to make sure we're not isolating any listeners. But everyone out there who has listened, if you've somehow managed to listen to episodes 1 through 53, thank you so much. Matt and I both love doing this, as hopefully you can tell by just listening to it. And we are so grateful for you and for tuning in every week and for sharing it with your friends, and telling everyone how awesome we are. So thank you so much, listeners.
Yes, thank you.
And Matt, if the people, this is the part we talk about that we don't want people to tune out yet. So if you're listening, don't move on to your next podcast.
Yeah. Pretend this is important.
Because it is important. It is important
because right.
because number one, we want you to go on whatever podcasting app you're using, and we want you to rate and review our podcast. If you're using iTunes, you have to go search for the podcast in iTunes. If you're using Stitcher, I don't use Stitcher. There's a way to do it. If you're just listening on the website for some reason, leave a comment or just share the link to the podcast to someone on social media. Do something like that. This whole thing is reliant on people participating, especially the book club stuff we want to do. So if you're one of those people that loved the book club stuff we did, and want it to come back, if we get enough interest in it, we'll do it. So share it with people, talk about it, help support us, and we'll make it happen, because I love doing that too.
Yeah. And you can look us up on Twitter, and if you don't have a Twitter account, it takes 5 seconds to start one, and we can be the first people that you follow. And that would just
I'd be so honored. Honored. Yeah, I've been trying to be more active on Twitter. I think what we need to do is probably just use that Daily Planet Films Twitter account a little more than just being someplace where when we upload a new article it dumps it. If we actually use that thing more, I think we'll get a little more engagement. But yeah. So Twitter. What is your Twitter, Matt?
My Twitter handle is @moredenemail, which will be written somewhere below for you to just click on.
Absolutely. And mine is at ScottDaly85. That's DALY. Or at Daily Planet Films, or like we said, dailyplanetfilms@gmail.com. Dailyplanetfilms.com is our website. If you like what we do, if you like this podcast and want to see more of it, patreon.com/dailyplanetfilms. Donate a buck or whatever you can. Anything like that helps us, because sometimes we have to, well, first we got to host this podcast, which costs money, and then sometimes we got to rent some of these movies in order to see some of the films we're talking about. That costs a little money. So any help you could be would be awesome. We love doing this, and we want to keep doing it. And we love your support. So thank you very much, Matt. I think next week is a Kryptonian collection, and I don't think we've discussed at all who's doing it, or so we're gonna have to figure some stuff out. But
yeah,
we will definitely release what film that is going to be, so all you listening out there have a chance to watch it prior to our podcast. But we need a challenger, Matt. If anyone is listening that wants to be a challenger, come on down.
Yeah,
Chad needs to be dethroned. He's been on there for way too long.
Anybody, come on.
Yeah.
You. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see you.
You sitting at your desk pretending to work right now. Close that spreadsheet. www.dailyplanetfilms.com. Go.
Yeah. You driving, pull over. And then do what he said.
All right, man. This was a lot of fun. Here's to another 52 to 3 episodes. I'm not sure what I forgot what episode number 1. I think it's 53.
Yeah. Well, roughly 1 year and 100-ish hours of podcast.
There you go.
Ahead. Yeah.
There you go. Exciting times. Thanks, Matt, and everyone else out there. We will see you next week.
Podcast is over, it's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school, maybe the gym. Hey, that's cool. Regardless, just go away.